Good evening, podcast listeners. I hope you're all looking forward to a restful Easter weekend with plenty of painting, modelling, and if you can, some gaming on table. Tonight's podcast is slightly longer than usual, so appropriate for the Easter weekend. And I also want to give you a heads up that next week we will be recording a special podcast to go through the changes that are happening in the list and the points and how that impacts things, picking out some favorite lists, seeing how things are going that's for the new 2021 changes. So what are we going to do in this podcast? Well, we're going to Asia and we're going to be looking at the warring states. And we're going to specifically look at the Qin dynasty and the Han dynasty, look at their history, look at the armies, how you might create them, and how you might create competitive armies for tournaments. And on that note, we're going to be joined tonight by Pete Entwistle, who has used Qin. He won at Burton with it. And he placed very highly in the individual world championships last year. So someone who has used the list in anger and done very well. So we're very lucky to have him with us. Obviously, I'm joined by podcast regulars, Nick Goutrocker and Richard Jeffrey Cook, who are going to do all the clever things. And they will be leading the history piece of the podcast. The other thing that we have, which is an interview after the Qin and Han section with Tim Porter, who is the head honcho over at the BHGS. And why do I think the BHGS is important? I think it's important because they run events which have proven to be very popular with the MEG community. And they've been around for a very long time and they've done a hell of a lot for the hobby. So we'll be hearing from Tim and we'll be hearing his opinions about how things can improve going forward. So without further ado, let's crack on with the Qin and the Han. Right, so what we're going to now do is look at the troops available to us in the Qin list, which we find on the PDFs on the website. And once we've had a quick chat about that, we're going to go and look at how a pro user would actually choose his Qin list and what he came up with and how he successfully. So RJC, you're going to kick off with this?
Yeah, so the Qin list, part of the Warring States and Han list set, the second of Asian list set. And the army really consists of chariots. The chariots are actually starting to rapidly decline at this period. So the list can have up to 8 chariots. The classification of the chariots is fairly flexible, intentionally so, because it's quite difficult to understand how the chariot used period. So they are formed loose, average protected, experienced crossbow, because we know they had carried crossbow armored troops. They get short spear and melee expert, but you can also have the option of shoot and charge and devastating charge. So you can essentially operate them either in a sort of skirmish mode, really ready and willing to fight, or as a sort of bust through chariot and strike. Along with that, you've got cavalry, both heavy and skirmish cavalry, although cavalry are a very small part. They were only about % of Qin forces cavalry, although that was to grow later. And then you've got infantry equipped with a range of weapons. The infantry weapons, swords, spears, and halberds, which were known as G. So you get polearm, and you get the missile troops, generally crossbow, the missile weapon of choice in this period. The better troops, average or superior. The conscript troops are still average. The list also provides the option for mixing your close troops and your missile troops are 1/3 to 2/3 rate. And then you've got a collection of skirmishing cavalry and for skirmishers, they use the bow rather than reform. And you've got the option. The Qin is a sort of opportunity of those forces. I suppose the notable Qin army is the combination of polearm and devastating charges, which turns them into a sort of stronger strike force, really, obviously increasing the points cost, however. But that's the thing that probably distinguishes the Qin from the other warring states' armies.
And no allies. So even after they've conquered a warring state, one of the other warring states, they don't have any allies available to try.
No, the Qin basically incorporated conquered troops into their own army. If you were willing to fight for the Qin, well and good. If you weren't, you were pulled off to the middle of nowhere and settled in a penal. And
I also, just as a list, because quite a lot of compulsory troops, because many lists have very, very few compulsory troops, but there's quite a few in this list. It's not a problem. I'm just saying it's just
true.
Yeah, I can't really argue with that. Yes, Ray.
One thing it's got an advantage over some of its contemporaries is those conscript troops are average. Where, if I remember rightly, quite a lot. This is the Qin are definitely militaristic and up for a fight. Yeah.
So, Pete, so looking at this list, and you decided that there was some good stuff in here, and you chose this. So tell us about your list.
Yeah, well, I went for the main part of the army being the mixed units of the infantry with polearm and crossbow as a solid base, and they can put out a bit of firepower as well. To support that, I used the devastating charges, and also like to use 3 units of skirmish cavalry who can go forward in Cantabrian and hopefully shoot a few units apart in the process. The way I use my army is basically to wear my opponent down with all the firepower, and then when I'm ready, attack him and hopefully win.
Now, there's this thing is that they can go loopy or something, can't they? They can go berserk.
Yes, they can discard their armour, become fleet of foot, unarmoured, and I think they gain melee expert as well in the process. But I think the list states you must notify your opponent beforehand of this special ability. But I've never used that, which is when we were at the tournament in Belgium. A couple of the armies did have that ability.
It's a bit of flavour for the Qin. It represents their sort of head-hunting nature, and the sort of giving them melee expert really just counteracts the fact that they're unprotected.
Yeah, it makes for a very aggressive army.
And the fleet of foot means that they obviously can. It applies from the first time they declare a charge, so it gives them the option of charging the extra distance as well. So it does make it quite an aggressive.
Am I right that you can choose to do that on a game by game basis, can't you? So it's not built into your army list.
The list set doesn't specify. So that would be down to a competition organizer to rule one way or the other.
Okay, yeah.
My own opinion is if you choose the option, choose it for all the games in the competition. I don't think it should be a pick and mix option.
It's a nice ability if you're facing a non-missile army, because you're going to get in pretty unscathed. Somebody who's got a lot of shooting, you're going to get hurt on the way in.
Yeah, but you do at least get the fleet of foot though, don't you? So you've got the greater move. So you hopefully you'll cut down some of their shooting if you were to use it.
Yeah,
you're less likely to be slowed, so more likely to get into combat.
Yeah, true.
It's I mean, is it because of the possible shooting that you haven't used it, or is it just not deemed it necessary?
I just haven't used it in that format, and possibly I should try to.
Because I mean, just looking at your army, the one thing we've got the lists up in front of us. You've also taken an internal ally general. Is that on a classic? I'll save some points just to get the army I want.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Because as Ray pointed out, there aren't any external allies here. So, I mean, I must admit, looking at the list, you've got your 4 units of the close fighters with G, one of which is superior. That superior polearm devastating charger can be quite frightening.
If they get the shatter when they're going in the charge, it can be very nasty for your opponent. Yeah. But that's down to the dice.
Yeah, but I presume, therefore, you're looking to put a block of these guys in at once. You're not going to be
you've got to go in like that.
Yeah, because I think it's something I've seen. I think it's a mistake people make if they've got things like devastating charges. They don't commit big, so that because I've been on the receiving end of somebody who committed lancers quite big, got a skull first up, and then that just rolled. It was an extremely painful experience, although a very brief experience for my troops. So
I mean, you want as much contiguous fighting, don't you, when you go in with dev charges?
Yeah, you want to get in. If you've got a lot charging at the same time, then like Nick says, if you get the skulls or shatters, it's going to roll down the line.
It changes the odds quite a lot.
Pete, how do you use the cavalry? Because you've only got the one.
Yeah, I use it more in a supportive role. That if I can get a flank, or if I can get a breakthrough and get through my opponent, then I can use it more effectively. But I do tend to like the polearm is very good when it does charge in, because it also has the ability to get shatters as well. The mounted polearm.
Yeah, and has a claim in melee, so it's the equivalent of melee expert.
Yes,
as well.
Yeah, second round, yeah.
Yeah, so I think sometimes people miss that because there's nothing in the characteristics column. You have to remind yourself, oh, hang on, it's sort of 2 in 1.
Yeah. See, I like to play the general, the CNC floating, so I can issue the cards out where I need them as well.
Actually, that's an interesting point as well, actually. I've only just noticed. You've a very unusual, mediocre CNC.
Yeah.
I think I've only ever seen 1 or 2 other people do that.
I think that was a bit of a necessity to try and get the units into the army that I wanted. I had to play about with the general.
But still, after that, you've got 2 talented and a competent, so you're not short of points of cards. So it's...
So polearm has all the characteristics of spear. So you're getting +1 in both. You're getting +1 in melee as well, both mounted and foot.
Foot polearm only gets the plus again if it's.
I think you've got to be 2 ranks deep in melee for the bonus.
Foot polearm against infantry.
Yeah.
For melee needs to be 2 ranks. It still counts if you're mounted in 1 rank.
Spear needs to be in 2 ranks.
Yeah. Mounted polearm only ever needs to be in 1 rank.
It's good, isn't it?
Yeah. It doesn't get a claim against infantry in the charge phase, though.
Right.
But if you roll an S or a skull, depending on it does get the shatter. So it's a really interesting weapon, actually, mounted polearm.
See, when I was looking at the list, well, actually, I don't. So you've still got 13 cards, and this is a 2020 list. So has 1 PBS card been added since then, or is that?
No,
PBS? Sorry, Richard.
That stays the same.
Right.
No change
so
there.
you've got 6 PBS. You've got a mediocre professional. You don't care whether you attack or defend, do you? You just don't care. You've got flexible troops.
There's a lot of shooting there, so you can deal with a lot of things with it.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, I suspect it's hard to redeploy if you got it wrong, because all that shooting is tribal.
Yeah. And it's only 1 rank of shooting. Oh no, sorry, they're double up. Sorry, I'm talking rubbish. It's a 3-3-3 or a 2-2-2, isn't it?
Yeah.
The one thing you have to be aware of is that if you do lose front rank, then the units become quite vulnerable because they're behind the front rank of polearm. You've got unprotected crossbowmen with no missing.
Yeah.
But the big units, and they're very good for pinning your opponent, while the devastating charges, etc., do their job as well.
Yeah.
There's the master talking, you see.
Yeah.
So
I mean, they're 9s. They're units of, they are big units that you have to really grind down.
The other tactic I use with the army as well is to get within 4-inch, fire with the crossbows, and then retreat back and give yourself another round of shooting. And in the process, you're slowing your opponent down as well.
Yeah, I think we've all learned that one the hard way.
It's everybody does. Yeah. I must confess, not my sort of army, but I can certainly see how it can work. Yeah. Just out of interest, what armies did you fight at Badcon when you won the competition, Pete? Can you remember?
I can't remember, to be honest. You might have been there when I think whoever was fighting, it might have been Adrian Pitfield, and I was rolling some incredible dice.
Yeah, I was at Badcon. I must admit, I had my Han army, which was all mounted, and with all those crossbowmen, that would have caused me real trouble.
Yeah.
It's very good against a mounted nomad shooty army, that's for sure. So, and I wonder if that's one of those cases where it might have been worth you throwing off the armour.
Possibly. Yeah.
Just when if I'd been worn down and you were pushing, just to really squeeze the table with that extra one base width charge move.
Yes.
That's situational. Yeah, it's a fearsome army. I think I'm glad I didn't beat it.
I think confidence in deployment is what it needs. I mean, you could say, I don't know what you're talking about, Ray. It deploys itself because look at it. But I think if you get it wrong, some of your troops are never going to fight.
The other thing you can do with the army, because the mixed units, the front ranks flexible and the rear ranks loose, you can put a lot of terrain on the board, be it rough areas, etc., and you can still operate quite well in that as well.
Right. So forcing your opponent to attack into the places you want them,
all the infantry can effectively be loose because your close fighters are loose.
Yeah.
Again, I think it's different from most of its contemporary Chinese who get them flexible. That's back to Richard's point about the ferocity and wild charging, isn't it?
If you can protect your flanks so that your opponent's not going to get round, then you've got a solid wall of infantry there to advance with.
And all the foot is either flexible or loose. So
except for the close fighters, they are actually formed loose.
Oh, okay, but yeah.
Yeah, the mixed troops are flexible front rank loose for the missile, but the entire close fighting they are just loose.
But the what card do you need to change a tug of tribal flexible? Sounds like a red to me.
Yeah, it probably will be. If you started to change what they are inflexible, I think you've got problems at that point.
Right, something else has gone wrong.
Yeah.
Mind you, if you're keeping them as a group, oh no, they're not the depth chart. Yeah, anyway, I was going to say it's a red and a green, isn't it? Interesting. Yeah. Okay. So I think my army is now, having seen Pete's, I've realised that he's done a bit of a min-max. He's got a plan. He knows what he's doing. And I've just kind of tried to make my army look like other armies. So
you've never played with it, have you, Ray?
No.
Presumably, Pete, you gave it some run-outs beforehand. And
played quite a few games with it now, yeah.
The truth is, I don't even have the figures to do it. So can you switch to my list so I can just talk the listener through that? So I went for the command and control. I went for 4 competent professional generals, and then I've got the flexibility the commander can be floating. And I wanted to get 7 PBS, and I wanted 4 scouting because 4, obviously the army is a lot more than that, but 4 is a pretty solid scouting. So the differences are when I looked at the list, all I could think about, so it's completely opposite of what Pete's saying, which is why this is hilarious. So I looked at the list and I'm thinking, right, I want those close fighters with G because they're rock hard, average protected, polearm, dev charge. Yes, please. I want them, right? And I want the superiors. So I'm going to have 4 and 2 of them are going to be superior. And then I'm looking at and that's a strike force. And I want another strike force, right? I want full fat chariots. I want chariots with everything. So I'll have some of them, and I'll have the heavy cavalry as well. So the other bits, the bits that Pete says are the really good things in the army, I was just kind of like making up the numbers with them. So yeah. And then I also wanted to make sure I had 11 tugs, so it broke on 6. So I've got a unit of the levies, really, really cheap unit, infantry, tribal, loose, poor, unprotected. Actually, I'll run through the list. So I've got close fighters with G, the infantry, form loose, average protected polearm. I've got 2 of those. Then I've got 2 of those, but they're superior. So infantry, form loose, superior protected polearm, dev charge. So that to me was my strike force.
And that's the same as basically you've got one more that's superior. I have 4 units, and you have. So very similar.
I when it said half could be superior, right? I want 2 and 2. And then my close fighters, is this the same composition? I've got two of the front rank and 4 of the back rank.
I've tried to go for 3s and 6s.
Yeah, so
and then the occasional 2 and 4.
Yours are really hard to wear down. Mine probably wouldn't be. So I think I've completely cocked up the army. So my close fighters, so I've got are tugs of 6 with two pole armor and 4 missile troops. But I'd probably use them slightly differently. That's my excuse. And then a heavy cavalry, which I made dismountable, and then the chariots. And like Pete, I really like the idea of 3 sugs of average unprotected experienced bow, combat strike, and tabrium light horse, because they can, if you're playing someone who's fairly static, you can really rip a couple of tugs up with, ping, 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 ping for a few turns. And for, again, PBS, I wanted to control the terrain a bit. Probably didn't think that through because I really need to, and the 4 scouting cards. So I think mine would be a bit of a pig in a poke. It's neither this nor that. And I've probably compromised the good plan with this army by my choice. So I'm happy to be the duffer again.
But you've got quite a strong attacking force by the fact you've got the 4 close fighter units, and you can throw in the chariots as well.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted that dual. Yes, thank you for being nice. I wanted the dual threat, and I thought the chariots were pretty tasty.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a bad army, right? I think by taking that second unit of the superior close fighters, I think if like Pete, you'd only had one of the superiors, I think you'd be sort of one really hard hitting unit light.
Yeah.
But you've taken the 2 with the chariots. See, it's just a slight change of emphasis, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a bit more oomph.
Has anyone spotted Ray's list mistake this podcast?
Oh, I thought we'd leave that to the listener this time.
I had it checked before I sent it to you.
There's nothing leaping out this time. Richard, have you spotted anything?
I have to say I haven't. So
I got the Duventio tournament organizer to check my list.
Yeah,
I didn't want to be the butt of everyone's jokes again.
Yeah. And
right.
The thing is on that, I was going to say as well, just on that sort of it's a bit more front foot aggressive than Pete's battle plan would be because of its setup. You don't knock throwing the heavy cavalry.
Yeah, I know. Well, because the heavy cavalry have got someone to go in with, I'd try and keep them together. I wouldn't put one on each flank or anything like that. I don't know. I think it's got a couple of places to go, and it's not surprising that I've come for an aggressive army.
Fits you a bit more, but yeah. So it's solid army. I think possibly just the difference between Pete's used his, honed it. And if you went through that process, you might do something.
Yeah, but I think Pete's probably got an army that he could take to an open as well.
Yeah, it's an army I'm comfortable with, so I'm happy with that, and I would take it to an open.
You would?
Yeah.
See, and it's a better open army than this list here. Cool.
Possibly.
Well, the master has spoken, and he's going through his list, and I'm like, why didn't I think of that? Units at tugs of 9, grind me down. Come on, then, come and grind me down. And I tell you what, while you're trying to grind me down, I'm going to shoot you on the way in. It's great. I love it, Pete. I love it. Shall we move on to the Han?
We can indeed. Shall I?
We should try and get some for the listeners. We should try and get some photos of Pete's army that he actually painted to look like the terracotta army. Seen en masse, it's pretty impressive.
I like seeing it on the table next to me.
Yeah, on your table. Yeah.
So, as I said,
actually, before we move from the chin, if you play the special rule, do you have to put another set of figures on the top without armor?
No, I think what's been suggested is that you have some sort of marker, possibly with like a discarded armor on, so you can show that the unit has gone into its unarmored, unprotected mode, and that stays with it for the rest of the game.
Right, because that would be one way of making sure the rule was never used. If you have to paint a whole other army, for sure.
Well, perhaps a challenge for somebody to paint the figures.
No, thank you.
And actually, before we move off on that, just the kind of tournament stroke event discussion. If I was, obviously I'd never be umpiring because I don't know the rules, but I mean, if I was running an event, which I sometimes do, I don't think I would say if you make them go loopy, they have to stay loopy for the whole tournament. I think that's no. If you choose it on what you're playing in the next round. So I would, I'd have to have an argument about that.
Well, you could argue it whichever way you wanted. I think it really,
All right, if it was my tournament, I'd take my toys home, and I would say, you choose at the start of each game.
Yeah. You could even say that in a themed tournament, say you had a Chinese BCE competition, you have to choose.
I think that's
one or the other.
I think that's definitely more valid.
But in an open competition, you can do it on a game by game basis. Personally, as somebody who might face it, because I haven't got it, I'd be quite relaxed either way.
What does it say in the Bible about the peacekeepers, Nick? What a lovely compromise.
It said about the meek shall inherit the earth, and then I did read somewhere somebody suggested, yes, they will inherit 6 foot by 3 foot.
I've got more chance of getting into heaven than a camel to pass through the eye of a needle, mate. So don't worry about it. Right. Who's up next? So we're going to look at Han now. The Western Han. Is there any other than the Western, or
this is the Han dynasty up to 23 AD or CE, depending on your preference. So it's the army before the Han rebellions and the Capital East. So the army itself consists really of 3 main elements. The Han had that were based really around the capital and provided the central control, and then they had the conscript army troops who were used to do sort of border service, guarding the frontiers, and then they played with a mix of either or for some of the invasions that it took. So pretty similar to the Qin in some respects, in that you've got cavalry. You lose the chariot later on with Han list, but you've got infantry, except at this point they're better drilled, but they're less aggressive. So you don't get the devastating charges, you get the pole arm, and the standing army troops are drilled and the conscript army troops are flexible. You've got the option of mixed tugs, but the Han generals were fairly sort of flexible. There doesn't seem to have been a sort of dynasty-wide doctrine on how you use the troops. So you also get various options amongst the other troops in the Han army. You can have close fighters with Mao, with long spear, and you've got close fighters with Yan. Those were essential swordsmen who we classify as short-sword imp. So it's the Han, I find, is a sort of army of different choices. Do you go standing army? Do you go conscript army? And what other troops do you want to employ? Do you want to use the army with mixed tugs? Use the army splitting out, be close for the missile? The army. Sorry,
can I give you a little break? Can I just say, can you go down to the second page, Nick? I've seen something.
Sure, sorry.
I've seen something that I really like. I've got no idea what lists you've developed, but you've got these horse archers, cavalry, formed, flexible, average, protected, experienced bow, and you can have 3 tugs of 6. I'm having them every day of the week on my order. I want them top of the page.
Well, as it happens, I have I have them near the top of my list. I actually have 2 tugs. I couldn't get the third.
I bet.
But yeah, I have them supporting 2 lots of conscript cavalry. I went for the conscript army troops. So the army is essentially formed.
Right.
So I've got the 2 tugs of the cavalry with the mounted pole arm. I've got them experienced crossbow, and I gave them shoot and charge so that you can use them as a strike weapon. You can catch those nasty skirmishing horse cavalry by using your shoot and charge ability with the crossbow, and then thoroughly duff them over with the mounted pole arm. And yes, supported by the protected horse archers as well. So gives you a nice solid cavalry punch.
Richard,
Really.
can I just ask a favour? Just because you mentioned how you would use the mounted pole arm and the shoot and charge. Can you just run through that rule for me? Because I don't know the rules very well. So I'm lining up in front of you, and I'm going to charge you. So if you're light horse, I should have to be within 3 base widths, don't I?
Yeah, I have to be in shooting range, but
yes.
Essentially,
at the start of the charge,
when I declare the charge, I get to shoot.
Yeah,
and those slowing effects count against your opponent. So if they're running away, they're potentially slowed. If they make the mistake of skirmish, you're increasing your chance of catching.
And you're dishing out casualties as well.
With a bit of luck, yeah.
Yeah. Well, if you're not, well, anyway. So, Andy, do you shoot at your shooting skill? So you're shooting at experience.
Yes, you're shooting at experience.
Okay. And you can't do it if you're countercharging or intercepting.
You can't do it if you're countercharging.
I know a rule that he doesn't know.
Because you shoot when you declare the charge.
Right. Yep. So they can't.
You can shoot if you're choosing to skirmish or run away if you are being shot.
Right.
It essentially adds another option to your normal shooting options.
Yes.
But I agree with Richard. As it's the shoot and charge one is done when you declare a charge, and counter charges and intercepts.
For the listeners' sake, you've got to be within shooting range, not charge range, if you want to use shoot and charge.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You can still charge if you're further away.
Yeah.
Shooting benefits.
Well, to be honest, they're good without shoot and charge, but hey, shoot and charge makes it better. Well, sorry, Richard, I interrupted, but I think that's the kind of thing that people will get confused about.
Yeah. I mean, it generally, I find it forces your opponent. For example, if you've got the Cantabrian unprotected light cavalry that Pete was talking about, they've got a real difficult decision to make. If they get too close, they're risking being caught. If you run away, of course, your own shooting is less effective, because if you've got Cantabrian and you choose to run away, you don't get the benefit of Cantabrian shooting there. So
you can effectively drop from green to black dice.
Yeah.
And if you're in Cantabrian, you reduce your skirmish or runaway move by 1 base width.
You get -1 on your dice roll for
your dice roll. Sorry, so
that's very important. Remembering that on the dice roll.
Yeah.
A lot of people do exactly what you said, Ray. They think it's 1 off the movement, and that's just the normal movement phase movement if you start or end in Cantabrian. But in the skirmishing part, either skirmish or run away, if you start in Cantabrian, it's -1 on your dice. So it's increasing your chance of skirmishing or running away a shorter distance.
Yeah.
So again, combine that with the shoot and charge. If your opponent's got shoot and charge, they could be inflicting slows on you as well.
Yep.
So what I think it means is actually your Cantabrian light horse are going to run away unless...
Which is good, because that means you're not getting shot up as much, which I think is the nuance that Richard was coming to. But I just want to have a laugh at Nick. So was that why your experiment with poor light horse who had Cantabrian didn't quite work?
It worked brilliantly.
Did it?
Yes, it got me the unit in the army I wouldn't have otherwise have got. I just for the listener, last year in an army for a specific competition where I had a very good idea of the army I was going to fight, because it was one of Ray's where you knew the person you were going to fight. I thought their army wouldn't be that mobile, and I could risk the poor, because poor are also less likely to run their full distance. So add to the Cantabrian, they're very likely to get caught, basically. But it was a specific calculated risk.
Fine. Poor old Richard's waiting very patiently to tell us about his Western hand list. So we've got through two units of conscript cavalry so far.
Yeah, supported by 2 units of these protected horse archers. The infantry are all, the close fighters are all flexible. Three tugs of 8 with polearm, 1 tug with short spear, and 1 tug of 8 with long spear. So I'm going really for a fighty army there, and I've just padded it out with 2 unit conscript crossbowmen who are just average combat. So they're going to be put somewhere safe and manage it. And then just 1 unit of skirmishing archers just to pad out the points, really, poor and combat. So they're really probably to either absorb shooting casualties, just to add a little bit of extra missile fire to probably the cavalry, my guess, as to how I'd use them. 4 competent professionals for the generals, gives you 7 PBS and 3 scouting cards. I'd probably choose to float general, the army commander. I think that's the way I'd probably play it most of the time. But if I didn't, just have the 4 generals and have the option army commander dish a card out to a sub general. It's all a bit sort of plain and boring, really. But
no, I just noticed you've got a unit of long. So you can only have 1 tug of long spear, though.
Yeah, those are the close fighters with Mao.
I've got Simon's video going. I went to the Mortimer Glorian website. It just started. That was Simon talking in the background.
All right. Richard, one thing that jumps out at me of this list is really the close fighters with Yan. Don't really. Is it you've run out of conscript close fighters with pole arms?
Yes, basically. Yeah. So I chose to max out on the close fight. If the problem is, if you want more close fighters, you've got to go to the standing army, and then you're using the drilled troops as well, and then you're struggling to get to 11 tugs. I'd prefer this sort of army. I'd be 11 tugs possible.
Strikes me as an army it's going to be a bit of an attritional fight with those 3 polearm guys. There's one thing about the Han, it doesn't actually have a punch, does it? Really?
It's a more we're going to bore you into winning.
And I think one thing you're always very good at, Richard, is at deployment, getting your matchups right. And I think that's what it depends on that list.
I'd agree. I think, you can go for an awful lot of terrain. It's not an army that's going to worry about terrain at all. So that gives you a certain advantage against certain.
Thinking about I've got 2 questions for you. So thinking about the terrain, what terrain could you? So long spear in certain terrain. So is not very good, is it? What you don't get your long spear factor. Is that am I imagining that?
I think you're imagining that.
Fine. Okay. That's a different rule set.
Yeah, I think you may be thinking of close formation.
Okay.
Who would then be disadvantaged by terrain. So if you sort of effectively wouldn't get your pluses, you could effectively be on a negative.
But with long, maybe there's some difficult terrain that you don't get your long spear factors in if you're in there as loose. Anyway, forget that. So you just kind of the best troops in the army, the cavalry, form, flexible, average, protected, experienced bow. You've given them. They're not compulsory combat shy either. You've given them combat shy, and you said you just brushed over it. Said they were going to be there supporting your cavalry, because for me they are just the ultimate find a flank and smack into it unit.
Well, I'm assuming that my opponent is probably going to try and protect their flanks, so that's why I would use the cavalry in combination with the horse archers, because the cavalry are very much solid troops to break through what's protecting the flank, and then swing the horse archer to do the damage if you get the opportunity.
Yeah.
It's also going to be a points thing, because without combat shy, they're going to be 130 points or something.
It certainly makes a difference.
Yeah. So you'll if you want those 11 units, it's the old compromise. It's one thing that does it demonstrates that the system works quite well. You can't get the perfect army.
Yeah.
No.
We're talking about 28 points extra if you don't have the combat shy.
Yeah.
So and so my argument was you use the conscript cavalry to fight, and you use the combat shy horse archers to skirmish what they are facing.
But if they end up, they can really bully light horse archers.
Yeah.
And in fact, any unprotected horse archer, that protected makes a huge difference, and the combat shy makes no difference if you're just in a shooting match.
If you're in a shooting match, I agree.
You know, if somebody's isn't quite careful, take your 3 units of Cantabrian guys. Okay, you're in Cantabrian, so you're getting the plus, but if you're not careful and don't keep them separated from these horse archers and protected, you're going to be shooting equally. Because
they're going to close on you. If
they're going to come up close and get the plus because you're unprotected. You know, then if they've got, you know, if they are supporting the conscript cavalry, you've got some shooting chargers in the mix. You know, obviously that's a sort of ideal world attacking them, but you know.
Yeah, and I mean, if the flank's exposed, you can be in skirmish formation and knit round the flank, switch formation, and all of a sudden there's a nasty tug ready to charge in flank or rear. 10
base width charge. We love it.
Always good if you can do it.
It's one of those ones that if you do that in a game and you get a flank or a rear with a 10-inch charge with those flexible, I actually don't care about the rest of the result of the game. I've won because I've done that charge.
Yeah, just hope you don't roll the blanks or the S's.
Oh yeah, that's the next problem.
Yeah.
Right. Shall we move on to Nick's? I can just imagine what it'll be. But let's see if I've got it right. Go on then.
Well, I think it's blindingly obvious what mine's going to be. Actually, before I reveal it to you, I'm going to get my excuses in first. Actually, no, I'll show it. I've gone for an option in the list for the Western Han, where you can take an all cavalry army. The list has infantry minimums, but if you choose to go fully mounted, you don't have to take the infantry. So you could. This is because the Western Han, as they spent a lot of time fighting the nomads on the borders across the Yellow River, and they started to use wholly mounted armies to go and try and catch them, because infantry are not very good at catching nomad horse archers, and definitely not in the strategic sense. So that's why the list can have it. I've also constructed this partly just to see what it looked like by taking advantage of an option that is in the new list, where any army that is wholly mounted can choose no camp, even if no. So that's addition. So previously, the Western Han, even if all mounted, had to have a camp, but now they can take the no camp option. But it comes at a significant cost, as our listener will find out when they look at the new army lists.
Can we also explain that the no camp option means that if you are invading, you don't have a camp at all. If you're defending, you actually take a mobile.
Indeed, and a poor mobile camp, I believe, to boot. Yeah. Yeah, and actually that leads straight on to my choices in army commanders, which have been driven by that, because I managed to remember it. Took me a long time to get my head around that with no camp. So I've gone for a legendary professional CNC.
So you want to be invading?
I want to win. I want to get that invasion.
Yeah.
A poor mobile camp. Okay, it can shuffle a little way, but it can't shuffle that far away. So
that's a very expensive general.
That's monstrously. It's 1,600 points of a professional general. That is, that's what you pay for Alexander. I've gone for a talented professional sub-general, and again, this is sort of been driven by this no camp option. I am very much keeping the possibility of flank marching. Yep. Invade, choose the terrain. If you get a strategic intercept, have the option for a flank march as well. So that you can really maximise the fact that there is nothing solid for the enemy to attack. There's no camp that can't move. The whole army.
A bowl of jelly.
Yeah, it's fog. It's mist. It means it's not going to be that big, but because you're paying a lot. Which only with the rest of the stuff in the army has left me with just a third general as a mediocre professional. So there's not that much command there, but I think there's enough. Just gets quite exciting if you flank march and 4 cards go off table. The army has got 3 units of the drilled
the standing army cavalry, drilled loose, average protected, experienced crossbow, mounted polearm, shoot and charge, and dismountable. So 3 4s of those. Then two 6s of the conscript heavy cavalry, which are basically the same but formed loose. 2 6s of the horse archers, as we have just discussed. Note, not combat shy. I've gone for the ones Ray was getting all excited about. I've decided for this army that saving of the points doesn't buy you enough extra to make it worthwhile. And then 2 units of dependent state cavalry who are formed flexible, average and protected, experienced bow. So there's only 9 units. That's it.
This actually should come at this point as a responsible broadcaster. I say, please don't try this at home.
I have to say, this is experimental. I have used.
Nick, don't try this at home.
I have used the all-mounted Western Ham previously, when it has to have a camp. It doesn't have the professional general, whatever. And I think it's a really nice army to use. I really liked it. I've used it quite a bit. Finished quite a way behind Pete at Britcon, but that's the way it goes. So the thing of this army is, it's going to be fluid. It's going to be bouncing all over the place. You may or may not float the legendary professional. A lot of the time, you probably won't, because you're probably going to end up with it quite dispersed. You've got the talented who can send stuff on flank marching. Now, after I came up with this list, I did come up with a slight tweak to it, which might be to split the dependent state into 3 4s instead of 2 6s. Gives you 10 units. This is the thinking of that sort of option is based on what would you send on the flank march, because with the talented general you can basically send 4 on a flank. Well, you can send 4 on a flank march, but a bit pointless without a time. You're losing 2 troops, and the chance of coming on. So the troops you're going to send on the flank march are almost certainly going to be flexible, so that you can come on with 1 red born by the flank marching, and you come on in the sub. It does. If you're sending 4 or maybe 3, you're really dropping the on-table tugs to break number to quite a frightening level. If you had 10 units in the army, you could send 3 on a flank march and still have a break of 4.
Yeah.
So that's something I thought of afterwards. But I have to say this army is obviously going to rely on its shooting. It's not big enough to throw units in. Although it's got a fair amount of the mounted pole arm. It's not big enough to throw them in if it all goes wrong. So you can spend a lot of time dancing around, but you're not pinned down by your camp, and I hope your shooting does it. I'll have to say that although all the cavalry have got dismountable, I can't think they're going to be honest. That was using up some points.
Right.
Dismountable's cheap, but again, it doesn't add up to anything worthwhile to add to it if you don't take it. So that is it. By taking the legendary general and all that cavalry, you end up with a PBS of 10 and a scouting of 5. So you really are hoping to dictate where and when everything happens.
So my worry.
You have to practice with it.
Yeah.
Something rotten.
My worry about this army is I love. It's one of those ones you've planned it out in your mind, but I'm worried there's not a single Cantabrian or a single skilled bow in the whole army. I don't think you've got the shooting power. You've got cavalry and 4s, 3 4s, 2 6. I don't know. You're a very skillful player with this kind of army, so you will get as much shooting as you possibly can at the point you need it. I just worry there isn't enough.
As I said, this was done something as an experiment to see what the new option would give you.
Yeah.
I do tend to agree with you. I think I would be a lot more comfortable with my existing one, even though it's got a camp that can be aimed at.
But in your existing one, Nick, how many tugs and sugs do you have?
11 tugs, no sugs.
Right.
So
and are they 4s or 6s?
It's a mixture of 4s and 6s still. I get the chariots come in as another unit, a 6 or more. I don't give them devastating charger. It is a skirmish army, and 1 unit of devastating charger does get you into trouble. Yeah, and you get a bit more dependent state cavalry.
Yeah.
I don't tend to have any more command and control, but it's more evenly spread and can give me a floating general.
Right.
Because as I said, I don't think you're likely to float the general in this one a lot of the time, because you
can't, can you?
If you're scattered to the 4 winds across the table, it's also possibly light in command.
You also can't afford to commit him as well, can you? Really? No. You won't have enough cards to power over units.
You would only commit him if you're pretty damn certain you're going to break something in pretty quickly.
Because
requires
you will
a lot of patience, I would imagine.
a lot of patience, and it would be vulnerable to bad luck. It was an experiment. There's something in it. It'd be interesting to try and use it to get the hang of it. But as we know, I always say, shooty cavalry armies take practice. This one would take even more practice.
So I'm going to say something, pretending I know what I'm talking about. But if your opponent mixed their foot and their cavalry, in trouble.
Potentially.
Well, I'm always going to make bold statements.
Oh no, it can happen. I mean, we've played games where you've done that, and it does. It is a nice combination. The slight problem with that tactic against the shooty cavalry army is the shooty cavalry army then skirmishes, and you end up with your cavalry ahead of the infantry.
Yep.
And then the next move, they get picked on with the shooting before the infantry can catch up.
Yeah, that's true.
But it does provide those multiple threats against it.
I did notice, not for this army, but in the list, what's available, Caltrops, which obviously, just going back to the histories, that's because they started fighting the nomads coming down from the north, presumably.
Yeah, it's an anti-cavalry thing. But they're quite expensive. They're something like 20 points a base.
Right.
I think I've used them in one game. And it's like stakes. When you put them down, you're then so tough against mounted, they don't charge you. Yeah. They just turn around and walk away. It's okay for sort of effectively driving them off, but it doesn't get you killing them.
I would regard Caltrops as more for scenario games than I would for action games, to be honest.
Romans caught in the desert against Parthians.
Yes. Like yeah. Just sort of back to this army, by the way, I don't think it'd stand that much of a chance against the two Chin, Pete's or yours.
It'd be a tough day.
All that shoot, it'd be a very tough day at the office.
Yeah, I think they'd be chasing you about, though. I think you could
have an awful lot of Benny Hill.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you're, I mean, yes, then it's difficult for Nick to lose, but he's there to win, isn't he? That's the great thing about MEG, as we always say. And for the listeners listening, if you come to an event, everyone's trying to win because of the point system, not because we want to win, we're going to win at all costs, but because it's the only way you get points. So you tend to get games which are very exciting because, the best games I've ever played, it's like 15-10 or something like that, because everyone's had a real go at each other.
Yeah.
There's not much corner sitting in MEG.
It doesn't pay. You don't do well in attack and break enemy units.
Yeah. But again, so this one be the reason to flank march, to at least get something round a flank.
So before we round up, tell us how things are progressing with you've got 2 tournaments coming up this year that you're organising. First one is Cross and Crescent, and I'm sales numbers. And how many tickets have you sold already?
I think we're on 24 or 25.
I think you've only got 4 left. So I think you're on 26.
Oh, right, okay.
Because I was encouraged.
I think we have a double booking as well.
Okay, all right. So I was encouraging the Kent Massive to come up north, get a nosebleed, up north, and I said you better get on with it. There's only 4 tickets left. So,
well, anybody, I did bump it on the forum yesterday just to try and promote a bit more interest.
Good. So you're going to get to 30. So Nick is now doing a bit of cat herding, and he wants to go through the resources that we have available.
Well, no, I thought you might let Pete talk about his second competition.
Oh, right.
Since you mentioned 2.
Yes.
That's the part of a bigger event, the Ribble Rumble, at the end of the year. And I think we've got 24 places there, but I'm not sure. The tickets will be going on sale possibly within the next month.
And that's once again at Element Games.
Yeah, but that'll include 40k and other game systems as well.
Yeah, but just for the listeners, really easy to get to, close to Stockport Station. Every train that goes to Manchester stops there. Place to stay opposite.
Across the road, Premier Inn.
Inn, across the road. Good. So, Nick, come on, let's go through the figure ranges.
Okay. Well, there are a number of figure ranges that are suitable for that. I mean, I play 15 mil, so the 15 mil ones are the ones I know about, and the good ones are based on the Terracotta Army, which I'm fairly sure figures Pete used are based on the Terracotta Army, and then he painted them terracotta. Ones I know about, have seen and used myself. There's Lurkio have a chin and a hand range. There's a lot of the figures are the same in both, but there are some ones for the chin that are a bit different from the Han ones. Essex also do a chin and a Han range, and the figures are pretty compatible with the Lurkio ones. Have you mixed them, Peter?
No, yes, my cavalry are mainly Lurkio, but my infantry are mainly Essex.
Yeah, but I think in size-wise, you could probably mix those ranges.
Yeah,
quite
and
nicely.
the chariots that I have are all Lurkio as well.
Yeah, so that museum do a Chinese range. They just call it Chinese, but it appears to be based on the Terracotta Army. Fighting 15s, same Chinese range that appears to be based on the Terracotta Army, and Magister Militum have a Han range, although when I had a quick look at it, it looked to be based on older interpretations of Han, although I think some of them are based in some history. I mean, the Han across East and Western Han lasted 400 years. So, there's nothing stays the same for that. 28mm, I don't know so much about, but First Corps have a chin and a Han range, and New Line Designs have a Han range. I mean, when this goes up on the forum, as we always put it up, if any of our listeners, I'm assuming there are plural listeners there, maybe being a bit optimistic.
Jeremy and Preston.
Yeah, they can always post up other suggestions on these. So those are the figure ranges that came out. I don't know if anybody else knows of any more that I don't.
No, I was literally going to ask Pete. My research was, Pete, what did you use for your beautiful army that you took to Brussels? That was it. That was my research.
Yeah, Lurkio and Essex for mine. Yeah.
Yeah, no, my Han is Lurkio. I think I've got a few Essex figures for some reason. This edition's reading material. Chinese history is, I think I categorise it a bit of a bugger to get hold of. Richard, what did you use? Have you got any specific recommendations? Because
I think your description as a challenge is probably fair. I ended up picking up various odds and ends. I mean, the first challenge is actually just understanding the different nature, because it doesn't have the same tradition of West, and military history is not a big focus. They focus and philosophy, military matters. So yeah, you're well. Go ahead with the volumes that you've covered, Nick, and I think you'll have covered the sources I came across as well.
Certainly, so the general history. I came across one out there which is a general history of the Qin and Han, because they do run, called Early Chinese Empires, Qin and Han. It's in a series of books called History of Imperial China. And sort of, I've not got it, but it looked as though it's possibly one just to get us for that background. In terms of the actual figures and inspiration on that, there are a couple of ospreys. One on ancient Chinese armies from 1500 to 200 BC. So that covers the Qin. And then there's one that follows on from it called Imperial Chinese Armies, Volume 1, 200 BC to AD 589, which covers the Han part of this. Osprey format, they're still pretty reliable. There's also another Osprey, a single volume, that includes material from those called Soldiers of the Dragon, which covers Chinese armies from 1500 BC to 1840 AD.
Bloody hell.
They're all by a guy called Chris Pears, and I think he just did a series of ospreys that cover Imperial Chinese history, basically. So I think these Soldiers of the Dragon, it combines them.
Can I add
the ones for me and Robin, because they got nice pictures?
Yep.
Can I add that you can also find some decent books on the Terracotta Army, so that's relevant for more of the specific detail of the warriors. The other thing, Chris Pears also did quite a good book on a series of 10 battles, key battles, ancient Chinese history. That's useful, the background of changes.
I mean, for the truly determined, there are quite a lot of books out there which are translations of the Chinese histories. But if you read those, you as Richard touched on, you're not going to get much specific detail that's really relevant to wargaming out of them. Right. And you can read chapters. It's a bit the same with some of the Arab histories. You read pages and pages, and people pop up once. That's it. You might get an extended genealogy for them, but they're only mentioned once. So it's for the truly determined. During this period, there's a couple of other things I would mention. It's slightly before, but obviously it's massively influential. Just, the earlier part of the Warring States is when Sun Tzu was around, the famous Art of War, which has now been adapted to, I think, every part of human life. It's almost become there's one for businessmen, isn't there? Sun Tzu as applied to corporate takeovers and things like that. So, it can be worth a read just for that, because it is so famous, and it was a practical thing. There's also another book called 7 Military Classics of Ancient China. Again, obviously links will be appear on which again covers some of the works that actually do cover military bits, and it's quite interesting. Difficult to turn into things like lists and war games, armies, and whatever, but it's a good illustration of the challenges when drawing up army lists, especially Chinese ones. The stuff on chariots in there, because it goes back before the period we've been talking about in this podcast. It's just bewildering, the whole array of chariots, and you think, what on earth? How do I turn that into a tug on table? So it's difficult, but again, it's, if you want to go into that sort of detail, look at some of the background of it, I'd give it a read. Neither of those are vastly different. So that's it. And of course, the one we said last time, Google Images, you might find something there. I have to say, when it comes to China, things as you move further east, you do tend to trawl up an awful lot of rubbish. Not from the east, always from Westerners projecting all sorts of weird thoughts about the east. So, but there is some stuff in there. You might find some stuff, but Chinese history is a bit difficult for us Westerners. It's just different.
If at the risk of sounding like a repeating record, the other thing I would recommend is the Society of Ancients and the 55 Years of Slingshot CD, because that is fully indexed, and there are a number of really good articles on the Chinese Army Qin by the likes of Duncan Head and Rannick. Well worth.
I'd second that, and also say, because just for getting access for the wider East Asian military, because there are really useful articles on other armies and nations other than the Chinese as well, which you just can't get information. It's for Eastern armies, Slingshot is a really good place to start.
And after, because we talk about because we've got two big fans and a member. Are you a member of the Society of Ancients, Pete?
I've just rejoined, literally about 5 days ago.
Was it just before you were putting in a big order for something where you get discounts?
Yeah.
But I've tracked down the president. I've tracked down the president of the Society of Ancients, and I will be having a chat with him for a future podcast. So I think we're beginning to understand that there's many reasons to join. Discount being one of them. We need more discount deals, Richard. That's your area, isn't it?
I will encourage the committee to explore the opportunities with traders further.
There you go.
A very diplomatic answer, Richard.
All right, chaps. Well, it's been a blast, as always. Pete, thank you for being a special guest.
Thank you.
Lovely to see you in these weird times.
Yeah, it's good.
Actually, for a podcast when people are all over the country, this isn't weird. This is how you do it. So great to see you. Thanks for joining us. And I'm sorry I didn't let you get a word in edgeways, did I?
That's fine.
I think although we didn't say it, I think we possibly agreed that your army was the best one for tonight.
Yes.
Yeah, as I said, I definitely wouldn't want to face it with mine. I wouldn't want to face it even with my normal version.
Agreed. I think you definitely won the Army List Challenge, Pete. All right, guys. Well, listen, we've all got things to do, places to be. So lovely to see you all, and see you soon.
See you again soon.
Cheers, then. Thank you.
Right, guys, I'm very happy to have Tim Porter with me on this episode of the podcast. And for those of you who don't know Tim, he is the head honcho at the BHGS. And they're a very important group who do a lot for our hobby. I do just want to remind him, there's a bit of comedy. The first time I met him, he probably won't remember this, but we were at a massive tournament, DBM tournament. He was up near the top table, and I wandered up to him and said that he was my hero because I'd been on Mad Axeman for a few years learning all the DBM stuff. And he looked at me as if I was some weird stalker. And I don't think he actually spoke to me, but so I just wandered off. So that's my first recollection of you.
Well, that's the kind of positive impression I always try to leave, really. I think wargaming as a group is very full of weird stalkers, isn't it? So you've always got to be careful. And I'm sure that's a lesson you've learned now that you're a media personality yourself as well, Ray.
So BHGS, British Historical Gaming Society. Now, I obviously know a little bit about that because I was a Reigate player. And when I joined Reigate, I think Reigate were pretty much running the BHGS.
Yeah, I think it was kind of another one of the many tentacles of the J.D. McNeil pseudo commercial empire of some sort. But I think since then, or in recent years, it's we've tried to do a bit less work, I guess, so that we can all do a bit more gaming on it. And what it's really ended up as is probably a combination of things, which hopefully are all reasonable to people. First of all, there is the BHGS website, which we've maintained, kept alive for, it must be going on for the thick end of probably 20 years now. And what that is really, it's got a number of sort of useful components. We maintain a calendar as best we can, particularly in these tricky COVID times, of upcoming competitions and events. And I think, there are a number of different places on the internet where you can get calendars. Some of them are very specific on forums or Facebook groups for different particular rule sets or periods. There's some very good ones on, particularly the Partisan. The guys up in Newark have a really, really good calendar that we steal shamelessly from. There's one on Facebook, Wargaming Calendars and Events. But what we're trying to do is to pick up not just the salutes and the trade shows and all those other things, but also, as much as we can, all of the increasing number, I guess, in recent years, and we'll probably come on to that as well, smaller competition in the historical world, because getting a calendar that covers all the things that someone who plays historicals could want to go to, whether that's a shopping opportunity or a demo game opportunity or a small competition in a village hall somewhere for one particular rule set, is kind of a useful service. So we put quite a lot of effort into that. We also run or have maintained 4 events of our own, some of which we kind of inherited, and they're all reasonably unique, again, in that sort of trend of more and more competitions and more and more competitions spring up specific rule sets as standalone. We run 4 events in the course of a year, all of which are multi-rule set events, and we try and sort of spread them across the country. The big one is Britcon, which has been in Manchester for more than a dozen years. That's the sort of 2-3 day pseudo residential event with thick end of 200 people and its own trade show. Historically in Manchester, we run it every August. We then inherited Roll Call, which used to be run by Shire Levy. I don't know if you go back as far as the Dunstable days for that one. When that organisation sort of petered out, we picked it up because it was a big part of the calendar for a lot of historical gamers, and we've run that in a couple of schools, and we've finally settled, or we're reasonably settled at the moment, in one venue in a school in Cranfield, where we run that most March, April, around about Easter, sometime in the school holidays when we can. So excuse me, that's about 150 or so people. And then we also...
Before we move on, give you a little break.
Yeah.
I think you've mentioned 2 really important things there. The events that you run are multi-rule set events. And that for me means that I get to see, whether I want to or not, people who I've known for 20, 25 years, I never get to see. People I used to play DBM with, people I used to play FOG with, I never see them. I think that's great. Calendar. I mean, bumping into Sergeant Phil Powell, it's great.
Well, the whole social calendar of going around the country and meeting different people and going out for a beer somewhere, there all these events, and I think now we are very much definitely in sort of a multi-rule set era, and if you wind this back 20 or 30 years, there was only one rule set to do. It was, it's WRG, and that was it. But you've got to sometimes have those opportunities to gather a certain number of people together. Now, there's a few other events that still do that. Warfare, the guys at Reading do that. Devices does that as well, particularly well. But these sorts of events have become slightly less of the norm. And
I think the other thing I was going to say, sorry, just to interrupt, but the really important thing is a trade show.
Yeah.
Now, from walking from where we played the last time we were at Britcon, the MEG people played, to the bar, because that's obviously a well-travelled path for the MEG boys, you have to go through where all the trade stands are. And you've got to bring them by, and everyone loves to bring them by. So this is, I think I want to get over the impression for our listener that, these events, that it is a multifaceted thing.
Yeah, it's got to be about much more than, certainly for Britcon, because people are there for so long and that's kind of the flagship. It's become more than just turn up and play a number of games, because, there are so many places that are offering that just play some games experience, but the trade show is so important to part of the way of experiencing it, particularly with Britcon, that we now actually have kind of sort of pulling the curtain back. We've kind of changed the financial model. So every player now gets or has got a £5 voucher to spend with the traders, to encourage people to spend money with the traders. And the traders like seeing people. It's a sort of more casual show. They can stand and chat. You can find out what they're bringing out or whatever. And for that part of the world up in the Northwest, it's kind of actually one of the bigger trade shows in the calendar for the whole Northwest. So we pull in a few hundred other people who come and wander around and see the games. And it's just kind of a nice atmosphere. But it allows the historical war games community to eyeball each other and see how many people are there, which is the same with the
how does that compare to Reading Warfare when it was at Reading? So we don't have any evidence what it's going to be like at Ascot yet, but this year will be the first. But how many civilians turn up at Reading to go around their trade show?
Oh no, I think Reading's a different kettle of fish, really. I think Reading's a competition and a trade show.
Okay.
Whereas I think Britcon is sort of a more integrated experience for it. I wouldn't be surprised if Reading is getting 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 people. It's it's big numbers of people moving through there. And that's why a lot of the gaming is sort of pushed off into a separate hall. But it's not on the scale of Reading. It's just a lot more intimate. It's just and it's that point of, as you said, seeing people that that you're going to see them and go out for a beer in Manchester or wherever. And building up those relationships over, sometimes there's definitely people that I've known for more than 30 years who you'll see, and it's your time of year to check in with them, and I think there's probably some gaming goes on as well if you don't organise your time well enough.
That's definitely how I feel about Britcon, and I know we'll talk about the challenges of Britcon, but meeting up with Graham Briggs, going down Canal Street, ending up in a transvestite karaoke bar. What more do you want in life?
Well, it's part of the schedule, isn't it? Really, yeah. It's absolutely part of the agenda and the schedule for sure.
Okay, so we got Britcon, and I think we're going to need to come back to that to talk about the challenges of Britcon. We've got roll call. We know roll call. It's at a school. It's multi rule set, and all the rule sets are competing for more space. And I think MEG filled its quota, I believe, the last time we were there. And
I think roll call is I think it's in sort of a sweet spot geographically, and that just sort of
central of the country.
North the M25. There's some big communities for some of the rule sets specifically. I think DBM is very, very strong there because Milton Keynes is a real hub for that, and some of the other places are very strong for it. You pick up a lot of the players from London as well. So we're always oversubscribed with roll call. We're not probably as oversubscribed as it probably feels from the outside. We run a waiting list and we try and balance things as much as we can. And normally there are quite a number of people who will book because we put the tickets on sale quite early and then drop out. And I know, I've worked with you on the wait list for the MEG competition last time, and I think we managed to get possibly about half a dozen extra people in. And by the time the event comes round, it's rare that there's anybody left on the wait list. But it is a tricky one. But it's a very difficult to find another venue, and I think there's a whole bigger discussion maybe we'll come on to on the challenges of venues for events of this scale, that break this almost sort of magic number of about 100 people. 100 people you can fit in a gaming centre or somewhere smaller, but once you're getting to 150, 200,
let's come back to that, because we're going to move on to things which are, the future. But I mean, I would say the one thing about roll call, I noticed that we have French players coming over, so it's just convenient. It's near. It's convenient. So
well, I think also to be, you see the same with warfare as well, for the Reading competition, which War Game Association of Reading run, and certainly I know a few Spanish and French players who will come to that, partly because the show is there as well.
Yes.
And the same is true with Britcon. They will fly into Manchester. It's very convenient for them and come in and they can do some shopping, and I suspect that's going to become only even more so.
I agree with
post Brexit and the issues people.
We are post Brexit now.
Exactly. Yes. Yep.
So now why I kind of separated in my mind is that we've now got two other tournaments, and we're going to talk about the UK Games Expo and we're going to talk about the London GT. Now, why I especially want to talk to them, I have not been to either. How about that?
Okay.
I've not been to either of them.
Okay.
So let's quickly deal with the London GT, because
So
I want to claim some kind of credit here. I think I introduced you.
You did,
to the London
absolutely,
GT boys,
to Zach.
So
Because we had a
40K player. They're 40K players. I introduced you. You did all the hard work.
Well, it's a couple of phone calls and a nice smile, but I think the interesting thing about the London GT, we used to run, or the BHGS used to run. That was when I was participating in it rather than organising it. We used to run a whole series of doubles events, particularly they were enormous in the DBM era. Around the country, there was 5 or 6 of them. It really was a thing. I think that rule set there was something structural about it that really made doubles work, and I think we were all younger and keener as well, travelling around. But there was something there that made that a sweet spot. And then we also used to run, there were team competitions. I think there is one at Milton Keynes still, but with 2 or 3 players in the same team. And both of those things were starting to run out of steam. I think they carried on a bit through the FOG era. And then with the fragmentation of rule sets, it became much more difficult to run events, either a doubles tournament or even a doubles circuit or a team event. And we were just kind of looking for a home to carry on with something that would tick that box. So you putting us in touch with the London GT, which is a big 40K and those sorts of games, almost none of which I've ever played, bizarrely enough, event, and running in a sports centre in northeast London, just sort of off the North Circular, that is a huge open space. And because it is effectively an indoor running track, which means there's, from a wargaming point of view, enormous flat area around inside the running track, and a very high ceiling for great ventilation, which is always tremendously important for us all. So they were keen on expanding into historical. So we put together with you, kind of added the team thing that used to exist in the BHGS calendar as best we could for multiple rule sets into the London GT. And I think what we
does the team go across rule sets? Do you have one FOG player, one ADLG player?
It's an interesting idea, I think, but I think having a club that plays 3 rule sets would be kind of challenging. So you've got some of the competitions are singles, because that's just the way they work. Some are teams of 3, some are teams of 2, all their scores going together. Last time it ran, we also sort of put our wing around a Saga World Championship, which took place and brought some other international people in as well.
Nice toys, nice
lovely stuff.
Nice
lovely stuff. And worked with them and got some support from Gripping Beast. So we're carrying on running some of those, and I think the MEG stuff has kind of grown into, it's now become the home for, as I understand it, the MEG World Championships, which has been in a didn't it sort of operate almost in an oven in Daventry from all accounts?
We certainly had two very hot years in Daventry, and we've unfortunately or fortunately, you've got to praise it. We've outgrown that venue.
Oh no, absolutely, and I think it's but I think being at the London GT.
But I think it's more than just MEG now, isn't it? I think it's the whole PSC tie-up. I mean, you probably you get to hear about these things more than me, but I think there's a PSC tie-up, and they've got multiple rule sets themselves.
Yes, true. Yeah.
So I think they're doing multiple things, and I think they see it as a retail opportunity. I'm sure.
Yep.
They're going to try and make money.
It's amazing at London GT. I think last time we brought probably a thick end of about 100, 120 people to it, maybe. And we were actually quite a small part of, I suspect, almost 400 or 500 gamers there playing GW and all sorts of other systems. But it's just a good chance. Again, it's that idea of the historicals hobby is the historicals hobby. And we talked about the advantage of meeting the same people and having a social calendar marked by competitions around the country. But equally on the other side, there's a bit about looking out into the rest of the hobby and not just becoming too... And
not be so worried about the future of the hobby, because you know what? As you said last time we had a beer together, the future of the hobby is great. You've just got to look in the right place.
Exactly. There's an awful lot of people out there doing all sorts of gaming, and it's kind of giving them a chance to see that there's more than just shopping on whatever GW have produced in the last 2 months and clicking on that. There are other things, and so
let me ask one very specific question, Tim. Sorry, for our international listener. So I would imagine the London GT is really easy to get to, and you guys, in anything you organised, had a good representation from Spain, from Italy, from France. Yeah.
No, definitely. But I think London is just attractive anyway to everybody. But where the London GT is, you're kind of northeast.
You can bring your partners with you; they want to come.
Stansted works to be close to it, but there's a whole set of the other thing is there's a whole set of fairly budgety hotels within easy striking distance of that venue as well. It's not got that London. It's London, so it's ridiculously expensive. You're into an area within a reasonably short catchment area where there's all sorts of different places that you can stay at different accommodation rates, and I think that's a really important part when you're looking at venues or places for it, because it's part of the overall cost of participation. Really, it's not just the ticket price or carrying the lead around.
I think we're beginning to move on to something I definitely want to talk about. I mean, I think London GT tick the box because it's the Skull Rollers. It's the MEG World Championship. I think it's still called Skull Rollers. I'm not trying to be funny, but Skull Rollers, MEG Championship, World Championship. We're going to get a lot of people there. But the challenge I have is that, as the cat herder in the MEG community, along with, Robin and many others, UK Games Expo in Birmingham at the NEC. I mean, I'm from Birmingham. I know the NEC, friends in Solihull, right? But I cannot think. It's centre of the country. It's big. We can have unlimited tables. If the MEG community is growing, and we've got the MEG tournament scene is growing, and we want 20 tables. I'm sure we can have 20 tables.
No, absolutely.
So here's the challenge then, because sell it to me, because I've never been, and I've been one of the people saying, "Oh, it's too expensive. The hotels, blah, 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 parking." I've been a doubter, so come on, let's get the facts on the table.
Yeah, no, I think it's because we moved an event, the BHGS Challenge, that I think some of you may remember it from the Licensed Victualers Association many years ago. Then
we stayed at the school.
We stayed at the school. Yeah. I've got some horrendous memories of the shared dormitories and showers. But we won't go there. That's a different podcast with a different.
I think I had to share with Madigan. I didn't like that.
Oh no, that's frightening. But I think we ran that there. Then we've run it at other venues, and again, finding venues is a challenge. So on this sort of principle of over about the last 10, I think it's 14 years now, UK Games Expo has grown up from being just a tiny event in a hall down the Hagley Road in Birmingham, some sort of slightly odd conference centre there. And then they made the jump to the NEC a few years ago. And then a big part of the concept of that is open gaming and competition gaming and friendly gaming and board gaming. There are acres. They now take, in a normal year, 3 halls at the NEC, one of which is literally just for open and competition gaming. And
so just to give that a bit of context, you're for those people who don't know you in your professional world, that's your gig, isn't it? You do.
Oh, I've spent 30 years running trade shows.
So 3 halls at NEC, that's a big show, isn't it?
Big. Well, put it this way. I suspect it's probably nearly twice the footprint of Salute, and with possibly 3 times the attendance. And it's for the role play, the board game, all of the other things under this really broad church of gaming, which honestly, nearly all of us, not all of us, because you can never say in absolute terms, but nearly all of us have got an interest in and do and take part in. So I play board games with people. You chat to people, and people are playing board games online now a lot more. I think
Tabletop Simulator, mate.
Tabletop Simulator, exactly. It's board games or figure games. It's the same thing, and it's better for board games in such a way. So it's one of the 3 biggest gaming events in the world.
Is that true?
The others big, yes, with Spiel in Essen and Gen Con in the States. UK Games Expo is probably number 3 at the moment. And I'm saying that because I don't quite know how big Gen Con is, but it's not going to be as big as the German one, but it's getting up there. So it's a huge event. There's independent board game companies. There's all sorts of things.
Wow.
And we're
able cosplay. Are there cosplay people wandering around?
Sadly, yes, occasionally.
I'm quite attracted to that, actually. I've seen some great cosplay outfits.
Yeah, no, I think it doesn't quite do the full. There are those sort of cosplay and fan Comic-Con events, isn't it? It's not a Comic-Con. It is. You're not having half the hall full of people dressed as clone troopers or something. It is about games, and the developers are there. All these little independent publishers have their stands.
When we say games, it's like Magic the Gathering. It's everything. It runs the gamut of
the whole thing. And they have national tournaments for. I think last time it ran, there was a 600-person X-Wing tournament taking place over the weekend.
Have you ever played X-Wing? I think X-Wing is a good game, by the way.
Oh, and
the models are beautiful, and you don't have to play them.
Well, at the end of the day, it's Star Wars for real, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't spend too much time going pew 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 with anybody overhearing you. But yeah, so it's a big event to be part of the community that we're part of, actually. And you're kind of in it. And the same way any event, you wander around and do a bit of shopping in that. But so being there, having unlimited space, being at the central location in the NEC, thinking some people are coming around and looking at us, but actually the people I chat to and myself and the other people I game with, we're all just actually almost happy to feel that we're part of something bigger, which is kind of important, because all too often, a lot of the events, there are 16 of us in a shed, and then we all go home on a Sunday, and you don't realise that you're part of something kind of bigger. And
actually, Milton Keynes, the campaign, is it Milton Keynes? That I wasn't out as a wargamer for a long time, and then I came out, and going to Milton Keynes, it was brilliant. I loved it. I loved it.
Yeah, no, exactly. But imagine Milton Keynes, and but all the people walking around are not normal people. They're people who are already halfway there to thinking what you do is socially acceptable. So
but there weren't many normal people in Milton Keynes, mate.
Yeah, that's a different. Again, we're on to a different podcast again. But I think so. It works from just being part of something bigger. It's where gives us a safe home for the event when finding venues are challenging as well. And I think the issue.
So tell us about the historical stuff that goes on specifically. What have you got going on that is in your remit?
Yeah, well, we do all the same historical periods, or we'd love to do all the same historical periods that we do at the other events. So we do. There's a DBMM thing in 15, and they do the 6 mil on the 25 mil bases, which always looks very impressive. Yeah, they have a specific competition there. We have 15 and 25 mil ADLG there. I think we've had some Renaissance there in the past. I'm trying to think back, it's a couple of years since it last ran. FOGAR, and then the FOG team there as well. We've had some bolt action there as well.
How many FOG players turn up?
I'd have to, there's a website. That's the other thing about the BHGS website. We've got all the results from all the other events. So if you want to try and remember where you placed in the, the DBM Western League, wherever it was in 2002, you can always go on and have a look at the previous results.
Yeah, I don't really like looking at those kind of results.
No. But I think there's probably best part of 20 FOG players as well.
Okay.
And I think it's Birmingham. It is the NEC, so there is a parking charge, and it is more for a burger than it is buying it from a van on an industrial estate in Shepperton or something like that. There's no two ways around that. But with a little bit of thought, quite a few of the different groups, if you chat to them, they've all tended to, somebody has picked up the banner and found a cheap hotel, because the thing about Birmingham being a major international exhibition centre, that does mean there's a lot of accommodation in striking distance, very, very close by, of all sorts of categories. Now, you can, if you want to game and inject it into your veins 24/7, you can stay on site at the world's most expensive hotel for what it is, the Hilton Metropole, for £150 a night if you want. But equally, certainly the group I go with, we now all have found a Premier Inn in Solihull, which is 15 minutes away. It's a Premier Inn, so you're paying 30 quid a night, which is as cheap as you pay anywhere else.
Yeah.
You're in a town that's got fantastic curries. There's now a restaurant we go to each time. It's one of these ones where you bring your own booze in, and really, really good stuff. BYO, really, really
Table
great.
Names.
Oh, yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then we kind of stagger out of that, and
is the Snooty Fox, the nightclub, still open in Solihull? I'm going back to my youth, when I was a youth.
Yeah, no, because we used to both work for a company that had an office up there, so it's quite a while. But I think nightclubs, there's a few years ago when I realised I'm just not going to be allowed in anyway, so I'm not even going to I've just stopped doing that.
It really was wishful thinking on my part.
Yeah, and the other kind of thing is people go about the parking, but we worked out that getting an Uber from Solihull to the venue that will fit 4 of us in, or you order a 6-pack, is like less than the parking, and then you can all have a pint at lunchtime. So you kind of, once you sort of amortize it, you're going, well, if it costs us 3 quid to get there and 3 quid back, and then we're staying in a 35 quid premium, this is the same as anything else. It just looks
all right. So we need a bit of thought. So okay.
What I would definitely suggest is find somewhere nearby that your group, that group, can kind of go to, and suddenly it's like, this is the Birmingham Curry weekend, and by the way, we're going to buy some board games, and we're going to we're all going to share taxis there, but we're all going to go for a big cheap curry and some pints of.
I mean, I've always in wargame. I've always had a if one goes, we all go kind of mentality. I want it to be priced so everyone can do it.
Yeah.
That I've always, and especially when I was playing 40k, there were a lot of younger guys in our team, and there's always a way. There's always a way,
and I think the one thing that's sitting as the thing that really slightly does my head in as kind of the cat herder on one side of the fence is there's a way in which, because UK Games Expo is sort of a 3-4 day event, and you can go as a family. Some of the guys I know who are taking competition, their partner comes up with their kids, and their kids go around the show and play games, and then they're wargaming, and then they come back to it. So they buy a family ticket. So the Games Expo has got visitor tickets for families, groups, 2 days, 3 days. Some of the gamers will come on Friday and do their board gaming on Friday. I've been up there a couple of times myself. We arrive Friday morning, get out one of these big board games that takes you a day to play, find a place near the bar, and our Friday is we're playing History of the World or something like that you can never normally get the chance to do in a big hall surrounded by people who don't think that's embarrassing, which is kind of wonderful.
I've just got this picture of my mind, by the way, that the only one time my wife Mena ever went anywhere with me. We went somewhere and I was playing, and someone who we both know started talking to her, and for an hour tried to persuade her to paint my fingers. And afterwards she said, it's your thing. I am never going again. That was it.
I think that you might have given it away who that was by saying, talk to me for an hour. That's probably
It wasn't Hammy. It wasn't Hammy.
Oh, right. Okay. Okay. We're going to have to talk about that offline then, definitely.
Okay. So really, UK Games Expo. When's the next one?
Well, the next one, they've had to move their calendar about. Normally they run kind of early June. It's kind of May, June time, but the calendar at the NEC, like everywhere else, has just been completely thrown up in the air. And in the exhibitions business, all of the exhibitions of every type, from widgets to electronics to trade shows, consumer shows, all the ones that would have run in the first half of the year are trying to be shunted into the back half of the year. So UK Games Expo this year, if anybody wants to have a look at it, is going to be, I believe, in end of July, beginning of August. Now, we're still not sure, or they're still not sure, what restrictions, COVID type restrictions, will be in place to affect an event with 24,000 people at it. So even with the best one in the world and the UK gets back to normal on the 21st of June, the exhibitions, or the large scale exhibitions industry, expects some sort of legacy restrictions to go on for a time after that. And also UKGE, because the NEC has had 12 months of events decanted into it's fitting a quart into a pint pot.
Concertina didn't.
Concertina didn't. So they may not get as much space as they want or need this year. So it's unlikely. It's still vaguely possible, but realistically, we're not going to be able to put an event on there this year.
Okay.
But next year, what we want to do is be back up and doing that. And I think we will still, certainly for a game from everybody I've talked to, I'm looking forward to going back to a Premier Inn in Solihull. I think. Did I say that out loud? What am I talking about?
I'm looking forward to go to a Premier Inn Stockport. I can't wait.
Yeah, it's rock and roll, isn't it? Our lifestyle, just how the mighty have fallen. But yeah, I think that side of it, that's one we definitely want to get back up and running as much as possible, because it's
and we could run it as an event within your event, and if we need it, I'm bigging this up.
Honestly, there's not. I think it's to think of the BHGS as some big multi-tentacled organisation with thousands of staff. What it basically is when we run an event, it means we liaise with the UKGE people to sort out the tables, so that each individual competition doesn't need to do that. We buy the prizes and have them ready to hand out to people. And if you so need it, because of the way the scoring system works in each competition, we will run a computer program to put all your scores onto a bit of paper that we print out and stick on the wall, so that you need to do it. So actually, we're doing as little as possible to take away the admin around running an event, so that any historical gaming system can say, okay, we want to run an event, we want to run our own competition, and we're basically, okay, can you do the umpiring? Can you set the theme? Can you check the lists? Can you tell people to sign up for it? And then we will do all the logistics and the background work. And it just all happens at the same time. So there's no other constraints on it other than that, really. It's a very light touch organizational support network, really, to make it easier for people who just want to run events to run some events and save them doing the logistics. That's the long and the short of it.
So, changing subject a little bit. What are you working on at the moment? What army are you painting at the moment?
Oh, I'm sat here on the desk. I've got some of the 15mm museum. Their new
Z range.
Yeah, the Z range. I've got some of the Scythians horse and some of the Greek light horse, which are lovely figures. They're nearly done. Because I've got, this is the way it always ends. I've got about 4 or 5 units of Thracians, which are Zeiston, which are really, really nice. Yeah. And I've looked at it and thought, I want to turn that into a Thracian army, because it's not kind of much. So, I 24 extra cavalry, and it gives me a chance to buy the Z range, which I like doing because they're interesting figures. I'm doing that. And then there's a few, what else have I got here?
Are you using contrast paints?
Not on those. We talked about it on the Man Axeman podcast, actually, this week. And Peter, one of the other guys on it, who's the big advocate for contrast paints, he was saying just use them because they're great for it. And I said, well, they're brilliant, but I almost want to do some figures without using them because they're a bit too easy, and I want to carry on remembering how to do other techniques.
That makes no sense to me whatsoever.
That's exactly what Peter said. Exactly what Peter said.
You've got your finger in the dike holding back. That's ridiculous. ridiculous.
Oh yeah, holding back the future, isn't it? Really?
So you mentioned your holding back the future. So
Yeah.
you mentioned your podcast. I actually have listened to a couple of episodes of your podcast when I see that what you're going to be talking about in terms of the army, the history, and actually, look, let's get it out in the open.
Yeah.
It's about ADLG. But
there's actually
a wargaming podcast that happens to be centered around that rule set.
There's two under one umbrella, really. There's one podcast. So on Podbean or on the website, there's the Mad Axeman podcast, and that's what it's called. But we do two different types of episodes. So one of them, yeah, absolutely, it's there. It's we look at a specific ADLG list, very much the way you do, and dig into it and talk about how to build a list. But if you don't play ADLG, that's not wildly interesting. But the Mad Axeman podcast, which always has a bizarre title and a bizarre write-up, is something that we started at the beginning of lockdown 1 last year, when about 6 or 7 of us from central London realized we weren't seeing each other to chat shit down the pub. Yeah. So we started doing a weekly Zoom call, and in fact, initially there were 6 of us, and then Tamsin said, you need some other input into this. And we said, yes, we do need someone who knows how to paint to talk on this one. So we just chat about what we painted in the last week, any tips or hints or anything that we've learned or whatever. There's a bit of banter. Andy does a quiz. We've got a new, we bring in some features. Last year we had everybody else educating me about Napoleonic warfare, because I knew nothing about it, which was a little bit bizarre, slightly surreal series. So it's sort of evolved into, I hesitate to say a zoo format radio show, but it's just a load of nonsense for about an hour and a half, or somebody said, it's like wargaming wittering. It's like listening to those blokes down the pub that you're sort of overhearing them, but you don't really want to be on their table. That's kind of where we're going with it. And
I think it's any podcast for, and obviously now that I'm, in that world, is perfect for painting. I mean, it wasn't a podcast, but last night I was, I'm sure most of this is going to get edited out, isn't it? But I was listening to Simon Elliott doing one of his lectures from Guildhall about the 9th Legion. And you just sit there painting. I painted a whole unit of Assyrian cavalry. It's just brilliant.
Yeah, as long as you didn't paint them as Romans through it.
That's funny. That's what Caltrops said to me this morning. He said, "I hope you didn't paint them as Romans." No,
do the right. No, I think podcasts have done really, really well in this lockdown. They're kind of, we do it really just because by the act of recording our normal chat, it makes sure that we do have that chat. So in some ways, if nobody listened to it, it would still serve a purpose, but it just means everybody wants to bring something. They want to talk about something they painted. They want to share something. Otherwise, you'll not bring anything to the table. So it's kind of helped keep us all sane and motivated and doing it. So that's really the main reason.
Final thing, because you and I could, we just turned this into a whole new podcast, just talking bollocks. Yeah. So
maybe that could be it.
So Britcon, I personally, whatever I could do to help Britcon be Britcon, I want to do. And I know there's a lot of people like me out there in the community.
Yeah. No, but Britcon's a real
we have a challenge, don't we, with Britcon? Because the actual Stalinist architecture building in Manchester is going to be knocked down.
Yeah, it's we've actually, the last 2 editions, we've both of them we've thought could have been the last one, but Manchester University's got a multi-million pound redevelopment project for that site. It's very close to Piccadilly. It's a valuable site, and they've been talking about closing it down. There was talk about knocking it down to accommodate a new bit of light rail in Manchester as well. So Britcon's been in Manchester for about 13, 14 years now, and the latest that I'm told, or I'm able to extract from the university, is that July next year is kind of the current date for the ending of that being as a facility. But they still don't know if they're going to knock that particular building down, and that date has moved any number of times completely at the moment. So I think certainly I've been working for the last couple of years talking to people, looking at some different venues to try and get some different options. And the aim is to keep as much of the Britcon, the 3 components. It's the trade show, it's long day gaming, Britcon sort of starts 8:30, finishes 8:30 on the Saturday. Potentially the Friday night game as well, though not so many people are keen on that these days. And have accommodation within walking distance as well. And those are kind of the three real main components of it. So that does sort of steer you towards university type venues. And I think the challenge we're seeing is that, or certainly pre-COVID, that a lot of those venues over the years have now moved up market and moved towards the summer conference market, because with Britcon we hold it, or traditionally we've held it in the summer, because to get the university accommodation and all sorts of other things. So we're still looking at other venues, but we're now the places that we've been in the past. If you remember Loughborough, you go to that campus now, there's not even a space to hold something like Britcon. They've redeveloped it into different types of smaller meeting rooms and conference space. And if you go, they're trying to sell you a package with meals and audio visual for far more than the cost of far more cost per head than we actually charge. So I think it's going to be hopefully we might end up running next year slightly earlier, just to sneak in, to give us an extra year's grace, depending on how easy it is to find a new different venue and sort of bring the short list of the ones that we're looking at the moment. The extra
can I just stop you there? You do have a short list. So
we've got some other ones.
Not panicking yet.
No, I wouldn't panic yet, because there are a couple that we were talking to and getting prices for pre-COVID. We've known this is coming for quite some time. Although again, to be fair, the other challenge is whether all of the venues laid off their venue staff or put them on furlough as soon as COVID happened, because events and conferences did stop. So one of the challenges is seeing when venues actually open up again and start re-employing the staff who manage and take future bookings. So some of the places we've not been able to get hold of people for quite some time, because they're just not there at the moment in those sectors. So we're going to have to move over the next couple of years for sure, but there's enough places out there to give us something of a short list. In fact, I've got another conversation in the next couple of days with somebody about something, ideally keeping it in north of Birmingham. I think is the secret, because with something LGT in North London, with Cranfield, where we're at with something in Birmingham, we kind of want something north of Birmingham so that our 4 events are spread across the country. And we'll see how close we get once the world starts to open up. But we're now getting close to having to do something to it. And even with a fallback situation, one of the questions I do keep asking myself is, you talk about the greying of the hobby, but the original impetus for Britcon to be in the school holidays was partly to get access to that sort of venue and the student accommodation, and partly because people would be taking their kids on holiday or whatever. But if more of us are now, or no, there are less of us with school age children and more people with adult children who've left, whether we've got actually more flexibility on dates. We're not seeing pushback for events in September or in wherever people in outside that school holiday time. So I think we've got more options than we might have done a few years ago, and it's making sure that we use those options to choose and identify something that's going to work, so that we can keep that going.
It's got to be done. It's got to be done. Brett, no, listen, Tim, thank you very much for your time. And I just want to stress something. What you do at the BHGS is for the benefit of all of us who play historical wargaming. And I know you're generous with your time, you're generous with your effort. And I can imagine at times it's a thankless task, but a big thank you from me anyway.
No, well, thanks, Ryan. I think there's an awful lot of people who've contributed to it with individual periods. There's a lot of people who've done it before me. I think having a background in the events industry, I've probably, for sort of there's probably about 15, 20 year period when other people were doing it that I kind of avoided putting myself forward because I knew I'd end up doing it anyway at some point. It was going to kind of be my destiny to do it. So no, it's great to do it. And, to be able to sit there at things like Britcon and see 200 people come through who are happy and having a kind of chilled out vibe and a decent experience of it and just being grateful for putting events on. That's it, because there's plenty of opportunities for gaming. I think if you when our calendar gets back up to full steam, depending on what you play, or if you play 2 or 3 different events, you could probably do an event sometime almost every weekend of the year at the moment, somewhere. So being able to bring together some of the multi-period, those increasingly rare big scale events, it's just like a really nice thing. It's kind of reminding everybody how we used to be when we were, perhaps more of a bigger, more cohesive group in the past, and making sure that that's not lost.
We can't lose it. Right.
No.
Thank you very much for all your time.
No, thanks for having me on, Ray. It's been grand.
And thank you. Thank you very much. See you soon.
All right.